Let's go. Time to get to it. It's week 10, college football. We'll take your comments and questions, of course, tonight and take your calls as well. Right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you being here. Discussion, debate, and analysis. We've got a call coming in right out of the gate. How about that? And once again, we do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. And we've left the link there in the chat. And before we take this first call, I want to remind everyone that our book is out. It is released. It's out there for you to grab up, snatch up, and tell me what's wrong with it. Disputed National Champions. College football's historical 1990s reset. We are happy to announce this, and this is a great read if you love college football. You're here. You love college football. Okay, it's a great read. All right, let's get right to it and take our first call of the night. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Chris,
Mark. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween to you.
I did notice, and I haven't picked up a copy yet, and I intend to, but I don't know when I'll get around to it, so I can't really say anything about your book yet. But I guess the question and it's not to like put you in the spot or anything, Mark. I just is the idea without having looked at it, and that's not fair to you because I haven't taken a look at it yet. But is it to kind of resolve the disputed part of it? Is that kind of what's behind it?
So I did not just go to the seasons in which many people believe to be disputed national championships. I went through every year of the 1990s. And the reason I chose the 1990s was, first off, I just believe that based on the average age of our audience, that would probably be a sweet spot in regards to interest, but more so because I consider it to be the most formative and impactful decade on the changes that have come to college football in regards to determining a champion. That most of that was accomplished in the 1990s.
In that vein, I guess, and I don't want to beat a dead horse to death. Some of this stuff we've talked about ad nauseum, but for example, I don't really see 1990 as a disputed season. The only reason I don't, I think Colorado had an ample, one of the arguments, I guess, maybe you can help me figure that part out, that they played so many, I guess, better opponents that it made it look like they were necessarily a better team, I guess, than Georgia Tech. But in my opinion, which I know my opinion doesn't really matter, but
Of course
I'm
it
not so.
does.
Well, I don't know that it does. I mean, I'm not even saying it should because I kind of think that there ought to be like a. I don't know if you agree with me on this. Like, I don't know if there should be like oh, an authoritative position that might be able to kind of figure some of this stuff out. But in my opinion, the way it worked out, I mean, that's kind of why I don't. And it's not to like knock a playoff either because some people want to, they want one team to be, named the, consensus titleist. I'm not even saying that's bad, but I just kind of think maybe I don't know what to say other than maybe, I don't know. All I know is that Colorado beat Notre Dame, and that was a belt championship. And I know you don't like that concept, but that's kind of what put them up on the pedestal, I guess. And I think Georgia Tech beat a pretty good Virginia team that was, at least at the time, rated pretty high. So the question, and I don't know, there's other teams in the mix. I understand that, but that might have been better than either one of those. You never know. But is it really that important to single it down to one team, or is that kind of my problem there?
So in this book, I do not single it down to one team. I in none of these way. Well, I shouldn't say that. I don't want to misrepresent this. I do not make a claim as to who the best team is. I in none of these seasons say this is the best team. They should have been the national champion. I make determinations that based on resume, logic, conclusion, results that some of these championships are not valid. Not necessarily that the championships awarded were not valid, but that there were other teams that had just as valid of claims.
And I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. I just, for example, I know because I was, at the time, I wasn't in school, but I had been in school, and the one season I went to Colorado was the season that they happened to be, I guess, in the chase. They lost to Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl, and that I think kind of killed their. But even then, I mean, I guess the question I have, it's like, does that necessarily eliminate them? I mean, they were had the same record. I think Notre Dame had the best record, but so I mean, maybe if it's between them and Notre Dame, but then there's like other teams that kind of come into play, and I guess I just kind of wonder even if a playoff would even help resolve that because let's say I know Colorado lost to Notre Dame, I no doubt about that, but I think Notre Dame lost to Miami, and I think Miami lost to Florida State, if I'm not mistaken, and I think Florida State, I can't remember. It's been long enough ago, I guess, if my memory is not as clear as it would have been, but in my opinion, in those situations, it's almost a judgment call, isn't it, Mark? Or am I wrong about that?
Yeah, when teams don't play each other, there is a judgment call to be made. I would agree with that.
Well, no, but I guess the point I'm trying to make, probably not very well. I understand Colorado. I kind of look back at that game. I was kind of wondering because, I think Colorado really wanted to win, obviously, but I guess Notre Dame was just a better team. I don't know what else to say. I mean, it's like to say, well, they didn't get the breaks they needed, or I kind of remember the game being kind of close. It was tied at halftime, I believe, but it was kind of weird. They had like a hot mic on Lou Holtz during the week, I guess, leading into it, and kind of everything he said kind of came to. It's kind of weird how it all kind of. He said, I don't remember his exact. I'll misquote him probably, but he basically said that Colorado would fade out, and that's kind of what happened. It was kind of weird. It almost like he knew exactly what was going to happen, but I don't know if you remember that, but I don't know that it made Notre Dame. They obviously were a better team than Colorado, but I guess in my opinion, in that situation, I'm not so sure I understand why. Maybe you don't want to share my opinion. I know they lost pretty bad to Miami, Florida, but in that situation, is there really a one team that takes home all the, or is it kind of a shared title, or how would you resolve that?
And again, you're talking about 1989.
I'm talking about the year Colorado played Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl for the national championship. It was
Yeah,
the
they played
100th
two
year.
consecutive years.
Well, I know, but it would have been the year they played. I think they played. Who was it? They played Illinois and beat them, and they played Washington and beat them, and they beat everybody except for Notre Dame. That's about all I remember about it. They played everybody.
Yeah, 1989.
Yeah.
Yes. They lost to Notre Dame 21-6, I believe was the score.
Now, and I'm not kind of pressing you, Mark, but now is that because it was kind of a what? I think you put a lot of emphasis on margin, or do you? So that kind of maybe makes it harder to put Colorado. Maybe if they lost 9-10 like they did the next year or whatever. Does that make a difference then? The difference in or does that really even enter into the idea of who's a better team? Other than to me, it really doesn't. But maybe in your opinion, it does. If they lose like 15 points.
So my thought is that if we were playing under professional rules, if we had an NFL kind of setup, then the score would not matter. However, we are pushed to have to evaluate these teams because they don't play. Many of them in the past did not play. And so we had to make an evaluation based on their level of performance.
Well, no, but I guess the point I'm trying to make, I'm not very good at making good points, I guess, but it was tied at halftime. I remember that. It was tied 0-0 at halftime. So the fact that Colorado didn't keep their whatever it was they had going, um, how does that impact? I mean, does it? I mean, I understand. I mean, Colorado probably wasn't the best team that year, even though it looked like they might have been up until that game. Does one game kind of is that enough to guess maybe derail a team from being in the consideration for it?
Well, it
I don't know that a
depends on,
playoff.
I was
Well,
just going to say, it depends on the circumstances involving all the other teams.
I guess the question I have is if there's a lot of other one-loss teams, why is Colorado automatically kind of because does losing the last game matter more than losing maybe the first game? Or to me, it
Uh,
doesn't really matter. But maybe I'm looking at
I,
it wrong.
I would agree with you there that
Okay,
I think in many of these seasons that the bowl game was treated like some kind of playoff game. And it wasn't a playoff game. It was just an extra game that was played. And we tend to eliminate these teams that lost bowl games. And most of the time that did eliminate them. Most of the time that was kind of a tiebreaker. But many times that simply elevated somebody else to a roughly equal status with somebody who lost a bowl game. So I don't treat the bowl games as playoff games like many people do. They aren't playoff games. They're just an additional game played.
Well, I guess what kind of confuses me. So, like, if Colorado, if they had beaten Notre Dame, they'd be the consensus, probably deservedly, I guess, if they'd have beaten, which they didn't. But
Yes.
I don't understand why the opposite doesn't necessarily come into play a little bit. Where, okay, since they didn't beat them, why isn't Notre Dame? I'm not necessarily trying to push Notre Dame on anybody, but if you can beat the best team by 10 or 15 or whatever, 15, I guess, is what else do you need to do? I guess is kind of what I'm thinking. But is
Well,
that wrong because they did get beat by Miami pretty bad? Is that the reason?
well, sure. And Miami went 11-1.
Well, I don't know, but how do you resolve that sort of thing? Because Notre Dame was 12-1, so they had an additional. To me, I don't know. I'm not saying necessarily that winning more games necessarily makes them a
I
better
understand
team.
your point. I don't think it's an invalid point. You're basically saying Notre Dame, Miami, and Colorado all had one loss. Let's see if there was anybody else in the mix.
No, what I'm
Well, you
saying,
also had Tennessee that went 11-1.
actually, kind of what I'm saying is I'm not sure why isn't just Notre Dame because they benefit, I guess, by playing an additional game. But I'm not saying that losing to Miami, Florida shouldn't necessarily matter, but I don't know where to draw the line is what I'm trying to tell you. And I don't know. I guess we could have like 4 teams in a playoff, but I don't know that necessarily helps necessarily. And so I don't make the decision, and I don't know that I should. But if it was up to me, I might just let Notre Dame have the title. But that's just my opinion.
Even though Miami had virtually the same record and they beat them by 17 points.
You said virtually. That's kind of the catch, isn't it? I mean,
Well, they played one
no,
less game. I don't mean virtually like Notre Dame was 11-1 and Miami was
they
10-2.
were.
I mean virtually like one was 12-1 and one was 11-1. So Miami could have played anybody on Notre Dame's schedule and just handed them a 3-touchdown loss and been 12-1. They just happened to play one extra game.
Right. Well, I'm not necessarily pushing Notre Dame. I'm just kind of Lou Holtz actually had the same argument. He said, we beat the number one team and it's like, to me, it doesn't really matter. I mean, if they want it to be Miami or if they want it to be, I don't even know who else was in he said I don't remember Tennessee being that good. But anyway, to me, it's like, it's not Colorado because they got beat. And I don't know that I'm completely sold. I know that Miami, Florida beat Alabama, but I don't know, remember if Alabama was the greatest team or not, but
They were undefeated
oh, okay.
before that
Well,
game.
I didn't know that. But
No, I'm
anyway,
sorry. I'm sorry. They were undefeated at 10-0. They lost their last game of the season to Auburn, and they were still the SEC champions at 10-1.
so they were one loss two then.
Yes.
Yeah, it would be a tough call. I don't know. I guess that's kind of where I kind of wonder if there's a way to single one out without getting into all kinds of, hypotheticals, I guess. But at any rate, I kind of thought I was hoping Colorado would win because that way it would be just one team. But in those situations, I don't know what the solution is because my guess would be Colorado probably beat a few good teams that were, at least capable of winning a championship. So I don't know. I mean, I know they beat Illinois pretty bad, and Washington, and I think they even played Texas that year. And
Well, this would be my determination, without really dissecting it. Would be one of two things: either you award Miami, Notre Dame, Colorado, and Tennessee all the national championship because they've had virtually the same record, 11-1 or 12-1, or Miami wins the national championship if you want to limit it to one team because they have the one win against that group of teams head to head. They have the game that trumps everybody else.
except for Colorado. I mean, I don't know. I mean,
Well,
you're
they didn't
right.
get to play Colorado.
I understand that, but so that's kind of where I kind of wonder if it's fair to give it to Miami. And I'm not trying to take a title away from Miami, but if it was my decision, I don't know. It'd be hard for me not to let Notre Dame at least share it, And I probably wouldn't give it to Colorado, and I understand why probably it went to Miami, but I guess I just kind of wonder if there's a better way to figure these things out without having to resort to things that maybe are important. But I don't. I mean, I'm not over it, and I don't want to be. But
Chris, there
what's
is a better way to figure these things out.
Well, yeah. So you say it's a playoff, and I guess I just tend to disagree that that's really what you know.
It's a playoff.
Well, I
So
disagree.
we've arrived at a time where it is the better way to figure these things out. Everyone that plays competitive sports has figured this out. That you play a playoff.
See, and I just I don't. I'm not saying you're wrong, Mark, but I just don't know that I really think that's really necessary. That's all. The season isn't supposed to be 16 games. It's like it's moving its way towards 16 games, and I mean, I get if they want to play 16 games to have a champion, I guess that's fine. But these teams
Okay.
can only play 12.
We're gonna end the this portion of the conversation unless you want to talk about something else with this truth right here
Okay.
that you realize that you just got done for 20 minutes, let's say, not being able to decide who would have won a national championship in 1989 or who should be the recognized champion for 1989. And then in the second portion of the conversation, trying to tell me that there shouldn't be a playoff.
Well, I don't want to rehearse that I just told you, but I think I already told you what I meant, and what I was trying to explain was, as long as Colorado was the best team that year, which I'm not sure they weren't. Notre Dame beating them. I don't know what else you
Yeah.
expect Notre Dame to have to
Just the
do.
fact that you use the phrase, I'm not sure, a million times during these conversations leads us
Well, why would I
to
be sure?
another reasoning that there should be a playoff
Well, all I'm trying to
because
explain
none
to
of
you
us
is
are sure. That's why you play a playoff.
I don't know how you get to the playoff part as being the solution. I guess I just tend to think that's not the right
Okay.
way to.
That's simple logic. So we're not going to get into that. That is simple human logic. That
Well,
the
if
the
if
entire
yeah,
the entire industry is built on competition.
I'll agree with you if it's a double elimination, then in that case you're definitely right. But I don't know, when did it start becoming double elimination?
It would be like saying, how do we determine who has more money between these two people? Oh, we have no way knowing. We might as well just guess or throw up our hands. We have absolutely no way. Maybe somebody suggested counting their bank accounts and their stock accounts. No, that's really not the way you would do it. I don't know how we would do it. There's no way to do it.
Well, if one game were like made to be like kind of where it used to be, where it was one game to decide the championship, then you wouldn't have to worry about whether or not the one team that won was the champion or not. But you
All
don't
right,
seem to
Chris, do
like.
you have anything relating to 2024 to bring up?
Sure.
Okay.
Um, I did some research and just to share with you. This is based on the way it went last year, but it looks like after 15 weeks, there should be three teams that have a equal share of the title. It'll be interesting to see whether there are or not. And it was kind of interesting last year because one of the teams wasn't even included, Florida State, but in my opinion, they should have been in the champion or playoff. Why they weren't, I couldn't tell you. It wasn't my decision, but anyway, they got beat pretty bad by Georgia, I guess. But they were eliminated, I guess. But I just don't. Again, it's the same point, though. It's like, does a
I thought we
playoff?
were talking about 2024.
Well, I am talking about 2024.
No, you're not.
After 15 weeks, there's going to be, in my opinion, we'll find out if I'm right or not. And that's after the conference championship games. After all the conference championships, there should be as many as three teams that are capable of being a national champion, is what I was trying to share with you.
Based on what?
Random probability. Yeah, I did a study of it, and it wasn't just an accident. I don't think that it was. I mean, Florida State could have got beat, no doubt, but they beat.
Why are you bringing up Florida State? They have 1 win and 7 losses. What do they have to do with the national championship this year?
Last I was talking about when they were 13-0.
Uh,
Anyway,
that's why we're talking about
it's relevant
2024.
because the real MVP. I don't know if he's responsible for it or not. He went like on a one-man crusade to make sure that Florida State. I don't know if he got what he wanted or not, but they don't because, and he gave a million hundred reasons or whatever it was.
2024.
Well, I'm
We are
talking about.
talking about 2024.
At any rate, I have 7 undefeated teams ranked 1 through 7, and then I think I have Army rated number 13. So I have
Okay.
8 undefeated teams.
All
in
right.
the top 13. Does that make sense to you?
Well, I know that there are a certain number of undefeated teams. I haven't counted them recently. I counted them when I did the top 25 that actually makes sense. But
There's 8.
who's your number one team in the country?
Oregon.
Okay.
I think
That
I
makes sense.
have goes Oregon. Oh yeah, Indiana. I have Indiana rated number 2 right now. It
Okay.
goes in Oregon, Indiana. I think I'm trying to remember. I don't have it in front of me, so I'm probably not going to say it
Okay.
right.
Well, let's not. We don't need to go through the whole thing. So you got Indiana 2 and Oregon 1. Very good.
Well, I
I
don't
have
know.
no issues with that.
But anyway, that's just how it works out. It's the thing I was trying to explain to you, that it's really not even my thing. It's just I know how to work the numbers, and that could always change too, Mark. It's not like, oh, okay, we know who the national. No, it just means that through 8 games or whatever, that's the 2 best teams right now,
All right.
in my opinion. It's just my opinion. I don't know.
Then hopefully they will play in the Big Ten championship game.
I'm not predicting who's going to play. No, they might. Who knows what could happen between then and now? But yeah, right now it's Oregon and Indiana right now for number.
Okay.
And
All right, Chris.
I think I have Pittsburgh rated number 7.
All right.
Then Brigham Young number 6, Iowa State number 5. Oh yeah, Miami, Florida's up there, and who's the other one? Maybe you can help me figure that one out.
Well, Pitt's undefeated in Miami and Oregon, Indiana, Penn State.
Navy got beat by Notre Dame. They're out. But our Army's still undefeated.
Yes.
So there's 8 teams, I think, total. But I only have 7 of them rated in the top 8.
Okay.
And I think the 8th team might be Ohio State. I'm not sure about that, though. It might be, though. Oh, no, I think it might be Texas. It's one of those 2.
All right, Chris.
All right.
I appreciate the call tonight.
Thank you, Mark.
Have a good night. All right. Let's keep it rolling here. The Voice of College Football. Once again, where is it? We've left the link there in the chat. If you love college football, it's not just history. It's a history, and then we project it all forward to the BCS, the 4-team, the 12-team, and the 14-team playoff, and a lot more than that. So it's a thought-provoking book that should spark a lot of nice discussions and debates. All right, let's get to the next call. We got to Real MVP stopping by.
Hey, Mark, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good. Well, normally I don't agree with Chris's rankings and stuff, but Indiana 2 is a lot more justifiable than Indiana 13, which is what the AP poll has. So,
absolutely, I'm right there with you. I've got him at 3.
Yeah, credit to him. Credit to him. This model's getting better over time, Mark. Something I want to ask you about is normally when we have this type of discussion of playoff scenarios, we establish a cutoff line between whatever they do and whoever loses. The odds of them making it so insignificant, we basically can eliminate them. And looking at the top 25 this year, I believe the highest ranked team that has no chance of making the playoffs is Washington State at 22. Would you agree with that assessment?
Well, I don't have the rankings in front of me because I don't go in on the rankings. I don't know them. I don't look at them. So I only know my rankings. So I would have to assume, okay, sure. I don't know. I can pull it up, but I would think, yeah, that everybody is either playing in the Big 12 for a championship or the ACC for a championship, or they're in the Big 10 or the SEC with 1 or 2 losses. So yes.
Yeah, that describes every team except Army, who's ahead of them at 21. And I believe if Army goes undefeated with a win over Notre Dame, I believe they would be selected ahead of Boise State. Now, that could be wrong, but I think that number of 0 beside their win-loss column would sway the committee.
You're probably right. That would be an unfortunate situation because Army, in my mind, will not have earned it truly based on the criteria for a power conference team, but as a group of 5 team, they will have earned it as an undefeated team. However, to be penalized for losing to Oregon on the final play of the game, which is better than any win Army will have by far, is a bit rough.
Right. I'm still hoping, and there is still a possibility that 12-1 Boise State does make the college football playoff as an at-large team, because there's quite a few teams ahead of them that I believe are going to lose games and are going to be behind them, and I believe the playoff committee is going to have them ranked significantly higher than what the AP and coaches poll has. Same with Indiana. So I believe these rankings are obviously subject to change. I believe the first playoff ranking by the committee is next week. So I'm looking forward to that. That'll give us a clearer picture. But Mark, I've got a few scenarios I want to lay by you and see what you think, okay?
Okay.
And these are realistic scenarios, in my opinion. So we're not going to have, I could have some random team beating another random team, but if it's not likely to happen, I'm not going to consider this. But here's my most likely thing that I think could keep Ohio State out of the playoff. I think that would be the bombshell of all bombshells, okay? So let's say Ohio State loses this week to Penn State, which I think is pretty reasonable to think.
Sure.
And they're 10-2. You have Iowa State and BYU both go undefeated until the Big 12 title game. And one of those two teams loses on a last-second field goal. Ohio State wins out, and they don't make the Big 12 title day. And let's say they beat Indiana close, okay?
Okay.
And then Indiana loses the Big 10 title game. Texas A&M wins all their games except Texas, and they don't make the SEC title game. Georgia wins out, so Tennessee would lose to Georgia. And then you have Clemson, Miami, and SMU all win out. And then you would have Boise State and Army also win out.
Okay, so we've got 3 out of the ACC at 12-1, 12-1, 11-1, correct?
Correct.
Then we've got the SEC with how many teams with 1 and 2 losses?
You would have Georgia, Texas, Texas A&M, Tennessee, and the winner of LSU, Alabama.
With 1 or 2 losses. Okay, that's how many teams?
6 if you... I don't know who Missouri plays, but I'm just throwing them out because they're not a good football team.
Okay, so 5, and then the other 3 is 8, and then you've got 2 teams in the Big 12 finishing at either undefeated or 12-1.
Right. Well, I think they both are going to go undefeated looking at their schedules, and then one of them's going to lose in the conference championship game.
Sure. So there's 10 teams, correct?
That is 10. That is locked in, I believe.
That is 10 before we get to the Big 10 with Oregon, let's say, undefeated, Indiana with how many losses?
1 or 2 losses. I don't know the tiebreakers between Oregon, Penn State, and Indiana.
So who do you have in the Big 10 championship game?
I don't know the tiebreakers. So it would be between Oregon, Indiana, and Penn State. I don't know if one of them play each other or not. So I can't.
You're giving a loss to Oregon?
No. Oregon can go undefeated.
Well, then they're in. Okay.
Yes, so Penn State lost the game.
Pardon me?
Does Penn State play Indiana or Oregon?
No.
So all 3 of them can go undefeated, correct?
Yes.
So that's what I'm having happen.
Okay.
Well, they all go undefeated, let's say. Or no. Let's say Indiana loses to Ohio State, for argument's sake. And then you have Penn State, Oregon in the Big 10 title game.
Okay. So Indiana's 1 game better than Ohio State at 11-1, but they lost to Ohio State.
Correct.
Oregon. So we already had how many teams before we got to the Big 10?
10.
And then you've got Oregon's in, Penn State's in. That's 12. We didn't even get to the group of 5, correct?
Correct.
13. And now we're looking at Ohio State. And we're looking at Notre Dame possibly at 11-1. Well, I think Ohio State would get the bid over Indiana for one thing. They won the game head to head. They lost at Oregon. You'd have to give me your SEC rundown because we would have to match up Ohio State against those 2 lost teams.
Tennessee loses a close one to Georgia, and Texas A&M loses a close one to Texas.
Then who's going to the SEC championship game?
Be Georgia, Texas.
Okay, so Texas A&M would not have another loss in the championship game. Okay, who's winning the SEC title game?
Georgia. Since they've already beaten Texas, I think it's
Sure.
logical to assume they would win the rematch since they were so dominant.
So Texas finishes 11-2.
Right, with their 2 losses being to Georgia.
Yeah. Well, you've got a possibility there, unless Ohio State gets a nod over SMU as well. How many more spots do we have to go?
I think one or two more.
Maybe they get a nod over BYU and they get a nod over SMU. I don't know.
That would be crazy if you had a 2-loss team get a nod over a 1-loss ACC team.
You've been
That
talking
went
about
under.
that the entire offseason, talking about
I
9-3 SEC teams getting into the playoff.
I know, Mark. I know, but I know. I think it would be not crazy for us. I'm just talking about crazy in terms of the college football world
Sure.
overall, because I don't think this scenario that I've laid out is there's anything insane that's happening. I think it's a very logical scenario that happened.
Not crazy. However, let's look at the current rankings, and we know that these are not the playoff rankings. However, let's use them as a guide. So you've got Iowa State at 11. You've got BYU at 9. You've got Ohio State at 4. Okay, if Ohio State, of course, it's going to help your argument if they get blown out by Penn State. But regardless, if they lose that game, this is the fallacy in rankings as well. If Ohio State loses that game by the closest of margins, 1 point, fumble on the last play of the game, scoop and score, something ridiculous, they really shouldn't drop in a sense, but they will, and I get it. But shouldn't the number 4 team lose to the number 3 team by 1 point on the road? Okay. Anyway, they'll drop, but they'll start to gain ground again with wins. They beat Indiana. They're 10-2. Are they really, with a loss to Penn State, going to drop below BYU and Iowa State that are obviously finishing off with soft schedules and just the game between each other?
Right. And there's something in the chat I would like you to address from Hummus Hero, who says that SEC isn't getting 5 teams in. This conversation is delusional. Now, I'm not going to 7 or 6, Mark. I'm just saying 5 SEC teams. To me, if they have 2 losses or less, I don't see how it's delusional to think they all could get in. Do you think it's just crazy out there that 5 SEC teams at this juncture could get in the college football playoff?
So I'm trying to think of my predictions. I picked 5 to make the playoff in the preseason. So apparently I don't think it's ridiculous. I'm not saying it's going to happen at this point because we've got a different set of wins and losses at this point, but sure, it can happen. The reason it most likely won't happen this year is because we've got multiple teams playing well in the ACC and the Big 12. We are not getting the cannibalization that we anticipated in those 2 conferences. But in future years, we will get cannibalization in the ACC and the Big 12, and we will have 1 bid leagues, and that will open it up for the Big 10 and most likely the SEC to get 5 teams.
Correct. I mean, I'm just wondering what he thinks is a normal and standard take. Is 3 SEC teams too much? Is 4 too much? I would love for him. He's a very wise and intelligent person, so I'm just kind of flabbergasted that 5 is delusional, because I think there's certain years where 5 Big 10 teams could make the college football playoff if things played out right for them. Now, it isn't going to be this year because Michigan and USC are terrible, but if they got on their A game and have been proven what they've been previously, they would be in the college football playoff conversation. So I just don't understand this take by Hummus.
Yeah, I believe if we go through the 10-year run of the 14 playoff, there are seasons in which the SEC would have had 5.
Right. Now, he does bring up a good point that I will mention to you. Would a 10-2 Ohio State team get in over a 10-2 Tennessee, or a 10-2 LSU, or a 10-2 Texas A&M potentially?
Well, of course, potentially they will.
Or do you think it's likely?
We've got to measure the wins and losses. So LSU's lost to a marginal USC team. So that's one of their losses. And Tennessee's lost to an Arkansas team that's probably going to go 7-5. So those are not good losses. The Ohio State losses are going to be first rate. That's not the end of the resume, of course, but that's going to be the first big data point, is measuring these losses. And those teams are going to have more marginal losses. At least those two will. Texas A&M, not necessarily with Notre Dame and, let's say, Texas. But the other two have a marginal loss on their resume.
Right. And I just, in my opinion, you also need to weigh the other factor of the equation is their wins they have gotten. LSU would have a win over Alabama that should be weighed in the conversation, which would be a far better win than anything Ohio State would have for the rest of the year. Because I don't believe Indiana. To me, there is still a paper tiger type team. I just do not believe Indiana is this world beater team still at this juncture.
Well, you don't believe that, and I get that. But if they prove to be that, and they prove that against the rest of their schedule, and Ohio State's their loss, then Ohio State better be given treatment for defeating an 11-1 football team in the Big Ten, and not the history of Indiana football.
I mean, that's fair and reasonable, Mark, but I'm not going to expect that much out of the college football committee. I'm expecting Indiana to be one of the few teams at A&O that is. I wouldn't be shocked if they're lower than what they are in the AP poll, to be honest with you, Mark. I don't think Indiana's going to get any respect. So, it's just the way it is.
Yeah.
I just thought it was an interesting scenario because everybody talks, I'm trying to figure out what was the highest ranked team that I think couldn't have a reasonable chance to miss the college football playoff. And that's where I landed on Ohio State.
Yeah, even if Indiana was given a fair shake by the AP voters, and there was no brand bias there, their undefeated record's great, and they've been very solid in every win. They haven't played a poor game or anything like that, but also they have no good wins. So I do understand the restraint on Indiana.
Correct, Mark. And, your other part of this video was to preview the Week 10 schedule, Mark. I'm looking at the schedule, and it's pretty light, except for one major game this year, or this week, the big noon kickoff game between Penn State and Ohio State. I'm a bit surprised, personally, that Ohio State's 3.5-point favorites. I think they're going to win by more than that. Yeah, I don't trust James Franklin. Penn State still, to me, hasn't proven anything of significance this year, that they're an elite team at all. Barely beating a marginal USC team, not blowing out Illinois. To me, if I were to power rate this team, I would put them at the very back end of the top 10, which is what they have been for the last 6 or 7 years. While Ohio State, I believe, is one of the 4 best teams in college football. What do you think about this game?
I believe that most people would agree with you, including myself, if we had not seen Ohio State's offensive line struggle as mightily as it did against the Nebraska defense that is a solid defense, but nowhere in the class of Penn State. I think that's where either people that hate Ohio State or Penn State fans are gaining a lot of optimism for this game, and where Ohio State fans are concerned is because they couldn't block anyone. They have arguably the best running back tandem in the nation, and they gained 2.7 yards per carry against Nebraska last week. And the wide receiver position is the most dependent position on the field, and Ohio State has the best wide receivers in the country, arguably, and the best weapons in the country, arguably, but they are rendered significantly less useful by an offensive line that can't block. So, and this Penn State defense is really stout, really athletic, and the defensive front for Penn State has a chance to, I don't want to say dominate, but come close to dominating, controlling this game.
I get all that, but Mark, let me put a psychological analyst on this, since I'm not as good at the football stuff as you. Nebraska got pantsed in Indiana in front of the entire nation, and they've got an excellent motivator and an excellent head coach. So I wasn't surprised that Nebraska came out as the best possible version of themselves, especially because I'm sure they've had this Ohio State game circled for the entire year. And then on the flip side of this, you're an Ohio State player and you're looking at it and saw Nebraska just absolutely rolled over and died against Indiana. And then you've got Penn State next week. I believe Ohio State was looking ahead to Penn State, and Nebraska was going to play their A-plus game no matter what. And I think that's led to the result we saw on last Saturday.
I totally get it. I totally get it. And if Ohio State is able to reasonably block Penn State up front, they have a better team and should win the game. But if Penn State's defensive front can wreck the game, then it's very much in doubt, and Penn State is probably the better team. They are the better team if they can get that done. This may turn out to be the kind of game where Ohio State is not able to put together long 75-yard drives that go on for 9 and 10 plays. I think that they're going to have to scheme about 4 or 5 plays that bust loose, and their elite talent on the outside is going to have to make 4 or 5 huge plays that are scoring plays that are 40, 50-yard plays that put all their points on the board.
Right. I also think something that Ohio State has an advantage is I trust Ohio State to be able to get a first down or two per series, and I don't trust Penn State to have that ability. I think Penn State has a lot, it can go 3 and out a lot, and Ohio State just incrementally work their way down the field and get a field goal and then a touchdown, and with the hidden yardage between their punters in order to score. I don't think they're going to have a ton of explosive plays because I trust Penn State's secondary to largely contain that aspect of Ohio State's game. I'm expecting this game, in my opinion, to be a 21-17, 24-21 type game. Is that kind of the ballpark you're feeling in?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. It was 20-12 last year. I think it's going to be a little bit more than that. They're going to find some plays, but this is still a defensive dominated game, but the offensive have some scoring ability. So it's not going to be some kind of Iowa fest out there, but it's going to be pretty subdued.
Right, which is, I know, Mark, that's your favorite type of football game. It's just these hard-nosed, between-the-tackle football games. A lot of defense, old school 1976 style football games.
Well, the further we go along with the modern approach to offense and the way these games go, the more I admire and cling to those style games. And that started back when the Big 12 when they got to the point where they were playing these 52-49 games across the board every week, where that just got it. 2 things are boring to me. One is ineptitude on either side of the ball. So 6-3 is boring to me as well. But also 52-49 in which the defenses are that bad. Now, if I'm seeing the 2005 version of Tom Brady and Peyton Manning in a shootout where they're just that good and their receivers and weapons are that good and they are just beating excellent defense, I'll take that. I'll take the offensive explosion. I'll take it as the outlier. That's what makes it entertaining. It's not entertaining to me when everybody does it all the time. And it's also not entertaining to me when all these offenses generally look the same. I like a variety of different style of offenses.
I completely agree with you. I think variety in college sports is a good thing, and I think we're seeing a little bit too much of these high explosive games, especially in the NFL now. The other game I'll talk to you about, Mark, is your other favorite team, the team up the road, as they're called, Michigan Wolverines. I know you're a big fan of them, secret fan of them. They're playing the number 1 team in the country in Oregon. Is there any shot, Mark, any shot at all that Michigan wins this game? Any chance?
Absolutely, there's a chance. We're not going to write off Michigan, and we're not going to lift up Oregon as an all-time great team. No, there's a chance. There's a 20+% chance in that range.
Okay, so you think there's a realistic possibility of this occurring?
Yeah, more than a puncher's chance. Yes.
That's interesting to me because I know your Michigan show is going on right now. I believe if I went on their show, I haven't been on their show, but I believe they would say there's almost no chance of them winning this game, and they're just hoping it's close, respectable, moral victory type. Or you will have the Michigan man take, which I respect him for still calling in, even though his team's terrible this year, as relative to last year, and hoping they kind of lose this game because he wants more fired. So.
And if we were sitting here X number of weeks ago on a Thursday night prior to the USC game, they all picked Michigan to lose to USC because they were crying about how awful they were, and they were mostly right. But I picked Michigan to beat USC. Now, USC is not Oregon, but at the time, it looked similar in certain ways. It looked similar. Michigan looked completely incapable. Like USC is not Oregon, but also Michigan is better today than what they were showing at that point in the season. Sure, Michigan is a shot. They have NFL players littered on that team that have won championships. And Will Johnson, if he's in the lineup, that would be a big boost to them in trying to defend Oregon. But again, I'm not making a prediction that Michigan's winning this game. Oregon, Michigan could play its hearts out and be leading 17-14 entering the fourth quarter, and Oregon could walk away with a 35-17 win.
Yeah, to me, what's interesting about your take is I feel like Michigan needs to score at least 21 points to win this game. And I don't have the confidence Michigan can score 21 points against literally anybody in the country, Mark. I mean, their offense is as bad as Iowa's. Well, not as bad as Iowa's last year, but they're like Iowa last year, in which I have absolutely no faith and trust in them being able to do anything. On the flip side, I trust Oregon to at least score a few times in this game just because of how much talent they have. So do you believe there's a certain number Michigan has to get to in order to win this game, or do you think they can win a 17-14 game?
No, I think that they would have to get above 25. They'd have to hit like the 27-28 mark to win this game.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be really interesting if Oregon lost this game, because it would tell us a lot about it. It would be very fascinating. It would really shake up the college football race. Because I believe everybody
winning this game 27-24.
Yeah, I believe everybody right now should have Oregon as the number one team in the country. As of right now, I think they have proven the most throughout everybody in college football. And if they were to lose this game, I would have doubts that they're really national championship title contenders. Would you have those doubts?
If they lose this game to Michigan?
Yes.
Well, I have those doubts now. I think that they're one of however many teams, 5, 6, that can win the national championship. But I'm not overwhelmingly confident that Oregon's going to win the national championship.
Okay.
I would take Georgia today over. I don't think they're playing better than Oregon, but who do I have more confidence in? If these two teams play similarly, and there's no change in the trend for either Oregon or Georgia going forward, and we start the playoff, I would still have slightly more confidence in Georgia over Oregon. If Ohio State plays to its potential, I have more confidence in Ohio State than Oregon.
Okay. I mean, I currently do too. The 4 teams I think can win is Georgia, Texas, Ohio State, and Oregon. I don't know the exact order right now because I need to see the bracket before making my final decision, because that's how close I believe these teams are. And that's how unbelievable, overpowered I think the 5 seed is.
Yep.
Final question I'll have for you, Mark, is I'm sure you saw Tuttle for Michigan's starting quarterback at one time this year, retired because he's had too many concussions.
Yes.
What was your favorite moment of Tuttle throughout this season? I mean, he had so many great moments this year, Mark. What was your favorite moment of the Tuttle era?
Yes, we should have done a Jack Tuttle retirement party. We should have done a highlight reel of Jack Tuttle moments. Yeah, well, to be a little bit more serious for a quick second, that's unfortunate that anybody has to step down because of medical reasons, and so we want him to be healthy and continue to be a citizen and live a full life. Yeah, Jack Tuttle, just the thought that Michigan carried these 3 quarterbacks into this season, and the one statement that I will stand on that I made weeks and weeks and weeks ago, among others, that Steve Dace brought up to me as being correct, was that, well, I shouldn't say it's correct, but there's strong indication that this would have been the best way to handle this quarterback situation, not initially, but once they got into the season and had already botched it, that if they would have just stuck with Davis Warren, I said at the time, I think it's more realistic that you can coach 2 or 3 mistakes out of Davis Warren per game than you can make Alex Orji suddenly capable of throwing a football.
Correct. I completely agree with you. And to me,
And here we are on a 4th quarterback. This is basically the 4th quarterback of the season. He just happens to be the first one that they played. They went through the first 3. They're on to their 4th quarterback, back to number 1, Davis Warren.
Right. I don't know how I'd feel if I was Tuttle to know that I was only given a game or 2 underneath a coach that I don't believe knows what he's doing in Michigan. And then my entire football career is over with. It was clear to me Tuttle didn't know what he was doing. He had a spark against Washington because they didn't prepare for him at all, in my opinion. And as soon as they got adjusted to him, it was lights out for Tuttle. Do you put any of this failed experiment on Moore and the coaching staff at Michigan, which has literally caused him to retire? And hopefully best wishes for him for whatever he decides to do going forward.
Well, for me to completely accurately assess blame, I would have to look at the transfer portal to see when players were signed compared to when Sharon Moore was given the job, which would have been post-national championship game. I think there was about a week there, maybe 10 days, that Jim Harbaugh messed around and flew all over the NFL looking for a job before he finally got one. If I recall, there was another delay in the Jim Harbaugh NFL sweepstakes that he put Michigan through. And so Sharon Moore was named the head coach, fill in the blank, whenever that was, January 20th. So we had one more portal window. Well, we had the conclusion of that portal window, but I got to think anybody that was any good was gone. Yeah, if I was Sharon Moore, knowing that what was most likely to happen, I would have had conversations with Jim Harbaugh about his heart of hearts at that time, because I would have been able to, if he's as good a football coach as he's supposed to be, or if he's any football coach at that level, then he would have been assessing those quarterbacks in practice. He would have had in the back of his head, I just coached 3 consecutive games, the biggest games of the season, as the quote unquote head coach, at least on Saturday, and I'm in practice every day. He knows how good those guys are or are not, and that he was gunning for the job. He should have, and this is easy for me to say sitting here. I don't know the dynamics to a T. And again, I don't have the timeline in front of me, but been pushing for a quarterback, knowing that it was going to be his job and knowing that he was watching 3 incapable quarterbacks at practice every day.
Yeah, I think just generally across the college football universe, that was something that was expected, because I didn't have any faith in the Michigan backups, as clearly proven right now. And Well, thank you for answering all my questions, Mark. It's good talking to you. Good luck to your team this weekend.
Thanks, DeReal. Have a good one. Let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. We've got Hummus Hero on the line.
Hey, Mark. How's it going?
It's going pretty well. How are you?
Doing all right. Thank you. So I want to call in response to DeReal as usual. It seems like that's usually when I'm calling in is to respond to him. So like the basis for me saying it was delusional, I don't think it's delusional to think that in a particular year that a conference can get 5 teams on. I think that would probably be with the 12 team, the upper limit, just because wins and losses start to add up. And even if a conference is, particularly great in a year, with the auto bids and the G5, it's kind of constricting with how many teams each conference is going to get in.
Sure.
But as far as this season, I'm just looking at it right now, and every SEC team that's in contention for the playoffs right now has a loss, at least one loss, correct?
Sure. Yes.
A&M has a loss. Texas has a loss. LSU has 2 losses. Tennessee has a loss. Bama has 2 losses, and Georgia has a loss, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And A&M and Texas play each other. So that's going to leave one of them at best with 1 loss. If they win out, the other team will have 2 losses if the other one wins out. Other than that game, Tennessee and Georgia play. So at best, one of them is going to end up with 1 loss. And then obviously LSU and Alabama play. And the loser of that game is clearly out because they'll have a 3rd loss. But I don't even know if the winner of that game gets in, because you'll have to look at what the committee uses as their justification, supposedly. I know that they move the goalpost a lot, but they look at good losses, good wins, and bad losses also, I'm sure. So if LSU beats Alabama, they give Alabama a 3rd loss, which kind of makes it so that's not as good of a win. Ironically, it's kind of a sword that cuts both ways or whatever. Alabama gets a 3rd loss, and Alabama already has a bad loss to Vandy in that scenario. So then you're looking at an LSU team, and what would their best win be at that point? So
LSU's best win?
Yeah.
Alabama.
Their best one would be Alabama.
Alabama, Arkansas, South Carolina, Ole Miss.
Yeah, Ole Miss. Okay, so Ole Miss is still technically alive too with 2 losses.
Yeah, so is Missouri.
Yeah, but I think Missouri is pretty much. I don't know. I couldn't see a scenario. Even DeReal admitted that one. He couldn't see a scenario where they would get on.
Well, we have all the respect in the world for DeReal, but we're not necessarily just going to take his thought here. And I don't think Missouri's that good either. However, certainly considered certain teams to be dead in the past, and we're talking about a Missouri team that does not play a tough schedule.
No.
They've got, listen to this, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Mississippi State, and Arkansas.
Yeah. So, and once again, so say Missouri would hypothetically win out, who would their best win be?
Their best wins either. Their best wins Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
Well, right now it's Vandy. It would be probably Vandy, South Carolina, Arkansas, one of those 3.
Yeah. So they have a very mediocre best win, and
sure,
they have 2 losses by a combined 75 points or something
yep.
like that.
Yep, 65. So, yeah.
I just can't see it. I can't see. I think Missouri's de facto eliminated already. I don't think that they have enough. They can't make up enough.
I got you.
But at any rate, so you're looking at best, because of what I had already laid out, that you could end up with 3 1-loss SEC teams. And then the only other team that I could see maybe that would get in with a 2nd loss would be a Tennessee or a Georgia because they would have the good wins if they would end up winning.
Yeah, I don't think I can't speak for DeReal, but for myself, I was not talking about it being probable or even likely in any such way that the SEC would get 5 teams in. I was just saying that it's possible, and it will be possible in the future. Is what
Yeah.
I was talking about more in the future, because my thought process going into this season, much like most people or a lot of people, was that the ACC and the Big 12 could be one bid leagues, or between the two of them, that they could only have 3 teams in.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, but at any rate, like I said, I don't think it's impossible, not even this season, because I mean, hypothetically, you could see these Big Ten teams start to drop games to random other teams, not the matchup games. You know what I mean? Say Indiana loses to Michigan State, beats Ohio State, loses to Purdue. You know, I mean, you could see all kinds of funky stuff happening. So maybe saying it's delusional is a little bit strong, but let's just say I think it's highly improbable. I think that
Of course it is.
I think it's more likely right now that the SEC ends up with 3 playoff teams than 5. But if I had to guess, I would say it's probably going to be 4.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I can't argue with that. That 4, I think most likely, let's start with the small conferences, or the other 2 would be 2 out of the ACC. And let's for a second go with 2 from the Big 12. That's 4. And then group of 5. That leaves, let's say Notre Dame for a second. Let's leave them on the sideline. That leaves 7 for the SEC and the Big Ten. So that's going to be a 4-3 or 3-4 split, one or the other.
Yeah.
So that's most likely our scenario. Now, if Notre Dame either makes it, then it's only 3-3, or if Notre Dame makes it, but we only get 3 out of the ACC/Big 12, then you're back to a 3-4 situation, 7 teams out of the Big Ten and the SEC. So yes, the 5 is, we're going to have to start seeing Miami and Clemson and SMU or whomever lose games in the ACC, and the Big 12 trim down to definitely a 1 bid league for that to come back into play, and Notre Dame to lose.
Yeah. Yeah, Notre Dame's really a wild card in all of this too. So we'll just have to see what happens if they can end up winning out. You know, they're going to take a spot from somebody. We know that because they
or see either Indiana or Ohio State implode, and so it's only a 3 bid league out of the Big Ten with Oregon, Penn State, and Indiana or Ohio State.
Yeah, I just think that with DeReal's scenario that he laid out initially, with Ohio State ending up with 2 losses, I think that you're going to have to look at those 2 losses that Ohio State has, regardless of if they have a win over like what we consider a blue bud. In his scenario, Indiana's 11-1. You know what I mean? So not only do you have a win over an 11-1 team, but you have 1 loss to one of the best teams by 1 point on the road.
Sure.
And then, I guess if they got blown out and just looked terrible against Penn State, then that could be an argument in that favor. But like I said, I think that the SEC will start, right or wrong. I think that are the 5 SEC teams maybe the best? I mean, sure. Yeah. But right or wrong, the way that they do it, the SEC teams will probably start to devalue each other by beating each other up. And like I said, there's only the potential for 3 of them to end up with 1 loss. So, and there's a potential that 3 Big Ten teams could end up undefeated going into the championship week, which is crazy, but it could happen. I hope it doesn't happen, because that means Ohio State loses to Penn State and Indiana. But we'll just have to see how it shakes out. But I just wanted to call in, Mark, and run that down with you real quick. And you have my admiration for your patience talking to Chris. I know Chris is a good guy, and like Duriel pointed out, he has a good. I like his rankings there, but I just don't understand that end of the conversation when he's saying that the 4-team playoff wouldn't have fixed the scenario he was laying out, because it's like it literally would fix it. You know what I mean? I don't understand that, but
Yes.
At any rate, Mark, thanks for taking my call, and I'll talk to you again sometime soon.
Thanks, Hummus. Appreciate it. Yeah. As we look at the SEC, as Hummus was saying, with all these teams with 1 or 2 losses versus the Big Ten, still with 3 teams with no losses. Now, how did we get to that place? We did not get to that place by the Big Ten dominating non-conference play and the SEC not dominating non-conference play. Neither one of them dominated non-conference play. It's just that the SEC had a better record non-conference. It's that Ohio State didn't play anyone. Indiana didn't play anyone. Penn State beat West Virginia. And Oregon beat Boise State. So you got wins against Boise State and West Virginia out of all the Big Ten contenders as it stands right now. Those are the 4 Big Ten contenders for the playoffs. You've got wins over Boise State and West Virginia and no losses because these teams didn't play anyone else. For the SEC, you've got Alabama beat Wisconsin. LSU lost to USC, so that was big, tagging them with a loss. Texas A&M lost to Notre Dame, big loss for the SEC. Tennessee won its non-conference game against NC State. Georgia, of course, beat Clemson. Who else are we looking at? Texas beat Michigan. Ole Miss didn't play anyone. They beat Wake. So really these 2 games with LSU losing to USC and Texas A&M against Notre Dame, that's tagging the SEC with 2 more losses, non-conference. And then, as Hummus said, you're having more attrition at the top. Good teams beating good teams at the top. We haven't seen many of those games in the Big Ten yet, but the ones that we've seen, just basically everybody's taking care of business. We haven't seen anybody jump up. Vandy tagged Bama with a loss, for example. So we've had that. So, yeah, the math is not working out well for the SEC because they lost the 2 big non-conference games and they're having attrition against each other. But we do have Ohio State, Indiana, Penn State playing each other coming up. Michigan could say something about tagging more losses on the likes of Indiana and Ohio State. Oregon really plays no one. Wisconsin, Michigan, we'll see. But there's your explanation for why the SEC top teams have more losses, even though they had a better non-conference record. The Big Ten maybe just fell into this. They had a situation where their top teams didn't play each other in a lot of instances. All right. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. We got Sean stopping by. Hello, Sean. Hello, Sean. You with us? Hello, Sean.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had myself muted. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay. Yes, hi. Yeah, I was goaded by a derail to call in based on a comment I made in chat here. I was a little bit surprised to see you so bullish on Michigan giving their chances this week against Oregon. I don't know how much of this is based on just the brand name. I have a feeling if you called them Minnesota and you gave them the exact same profile for this season, you wouldn't be giving Minnesota any chance. this Michigan team is not particularly good, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what leads you to believe they have a realistic shot of pulling off this upset.
Well, it depends what you consider a realistic shot. I said 20%. So, if that Minnesota team had won the national championship last year and had basically an entire defense that had won a national championship last year, that would be part of it.
Well, Michigan doesn't have an entire defense. They replaced a lot of pieces on that defense.
Yeah, I don't. I'd say it's more than 50-50 in their favor of returning players from that defense. But again, that's the differentiation I'll make between Michigan and putting the same results on Minnesota.
Okay. I was just going to say, like, if you look, I mean, at the metrics this year, Michigan's defense has been okay this season. They've actually been quite bad in the passing game against teams that are capable of stretching the ball. I think their pass defense is outside the top 100 right now, and their offense, I mean, noted just not functional this year. And you also said you think this is a better team than they were early in the year, and I would contest that point as well. I think they've been pretty much the same team the whole year. They barely beat Michigan State. Needed a red zone stand last week to pull that game out. Michigan State's not particularly good, and they got sort of kind of dominated by Illinois the week before. I don't know. I mean, like, I see nothing at all in this Michigan team that leads me to believe they're capable of really even having that competitive of a game with Oregon.
Well, I think part of this, and this has nothing to do with Michigan or Oregon,
Mm-hmm.
has to do with watching a lot of college football through the years, where it just astounds me how many times I get on here every Saturday and people are flabbergasted at Arkansas beat Tennessee, and they just go crazy. And during the week, I'm just randomly selecting that game as a 2-touchdown game. So there you go. You got a 2-touchdown favorite, just like this game, a 2-touchdown favorite, and you've got Arkansas at home. They're a team that we would put pretty much in the class of Michigan, maybe.
Yeah,
We
kind of
in the same class, and we could maybe put Oregon ahead of Tennessee, certainly at this point, but by that much I guess I've seen just way too many upsets. And even this year, there's been over 20 2-score double-digit upsets in college football. Why would I be surprised if Michigan wins this? I'm not expecting it, but I'm not going to be shocked to be sitting here on Saturday night and Michigan just pulled off an upset. We see it constantly.
Oh, yes. My counter to that would be Michigan doesn't seem like the type of team exactly that would be capable of pulling off this upset. You normally need to have like some sort of explosive dynamic. You need to be able to threaten a defense in some ways. Like Arkansas has some juice to their offense. Arkansas can put points, and they didn't need to put up that many points in that game. That was a low-scoring game that they won, but I mean, that's just my thought process. Like I would say Michigan State even would be more of an upset opportunity than Michigan. I mean, they're just a little bit more of a dangerous team. And Michigan has no juice in their offense whatsoever. They can't really do much of anything. But that was interesting. I wanted to call in and give that perspective. And
I get your point. I get your point. Again, it wasn't just about Michigan. It was about perceiving these games all over the place, where it's, I shouldn't say funny to me, but how many people we talk about these games like they're etched in stone during the week.
Oh, I know, absolutely.
People are surprised on Saturday.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And I
Like,
also wonder,
look at our real quick, Sean. Look at our conversations just in general all off season. Like people look at schedules and they look at like 3 games,
right?
and they just assume the other
Mhm.
9 are going to fall into place, and they're just like, okay, well, we just need to look at these 3. How could they fare?
Yeah.
And we get into the season, and boom, Georgia Tech beats Florida State, and here we go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and no one's even looking at, even considering for a moment, Northern Illinois beating Notre Dame. I mean, certainly crazier upsets have happened this year than Michigan beating Oregon. My perception of that listening was that I still think you're overvaluing this Michigan team a
Okay.
little bit, and I might not be. Maybe you just have a.
I'll stay with 20%
Okay.
chance. And,
All right,
that's and whatever happens on Saturday isn't necessarily going to prove that, unless they obviously pull off the upset or they play extremely tight.
Yeah.
Then I'll take some kudos from that. But
Mhm.
like I said, I could certainly see Michigan leading this game going into the fourth quarter 17-14 and losing 38-17.
Yeah.
What is that? No, 35-17.
Mhm.
Oregon can strike like that.
Mhm.
Um,
Oh, yeah.
I could see that.
Yeah. So did want to say that. Couple quick things, real quick, in response to mostly what you've been talking about since I hopped on. It seems like people are pretty dismissive of the odds of the SEC getting 5 teams in. I look at this and I don't know. I think it's like 50-50 whether they get that many in.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, so you've got 5 automatic bids, so that leaves 7 at large spots. So in order for one team not to end up with 5, you would have to have either the ACC or the Big 12 get multiple bids. And kind of looking at the makeup of the conferences right now, the ACC has a shot. Especially they've got 4 teams that are undefeated in the league, 3 that are undefeated in conference play. And somebody might get saved by a scheduling issue. Like Miami could lose a game and be left out of the ACC title game, and then that's probably about a good way for them to snag that second bid. The Big 12, I think it's like almost impossible that they get 2. It's very, very unlikely that they get 2 bids. And right now they would have 2 bids in with BYU and Iowa State. Kansas State is lurking behind, but given the parity in that conference, I don't see all of those teams just running through the table here. So in all likelihood, all of those. So there's at least a better than 50% chance. I think all of the at-large bids go to the Big Ten and the SEC.
All right. I don't know if you heard me whittle this down with Hummus Hero.
I
look at it this way. So
Mhm.
I don't think it's too far-fetched what you're proposing in general, but applying it to this particular season, I gave a couple of reasons why the SEC has played itself into a bad position in terms of nabbing the most spots possible, and that's because LSU lost to USC and Texas A&M lost to Notre Dame, plus their zigzagging losses at the top of the conference, and then they've got Vandy knocking off Bama. So they haven't had Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State, Indiana playing in silos, beating everyone. They've had attrition at the top, and then they've lost these 2 big non-conference games, whereas the Big Ten has had no non-conference losses out of its heavy hitters, the teams that are now contending for the playoff.
But the Big Ten also doesn't have many teams contending for the playoff either. There's a big drop off after the top 4.
Yes.
I mean, almost everyone else is way on the outside.
Yeah.
Looking in, so they're not going to get more than 3 bids.
There's only one loss team in the Big Ten, and there's no, unless I'm missing something, no 2-loss teams in the Big Ten.
Yeah,
Everybody-
Illinois got 2 losses.
Oh, Illinois got 2, but nobody's giving them a shot.
Right.
Okay. Whereas the SEC, you're just littered with 1-loss and 2-loss teams. Okay. So let's take it back to, so I'm going to paint the picture of the worst scenario for the SEC is that Clemson, Miami, SMU play in their own lanes. They don't play each other. They win out. You've got a Clemson, Miami conference championship game. You've got BYU, or I've got BYU on the brain because, of course, they beat SMU, but you got SMU who lost to BYU at 11-1.
Right.
So that's the best possible scenario for the ACC to get in 3 teams. Okay. The
Mhm.
Big 12, of course, has 2 undefeated teams. Let's say they, as you just outlined, could possibly run the table and play a conference championship game where one of them comes out at 13-0.
Well, that wasn't what I was outlining with those 2 teams. I was saying with that conference, I think there's a lot of parity in that league. I don't think I
going
think
the opposite direction at first.
Yeah.
Yes,
No.
going the opposite direction at first.
Okay.
So there's 5 spots taken, and Notre Dame and the Big Ten takes 3 minimum. And where are we? We're at 3, 5, 6 Notre Dame, group of 5, 7, 3 from the Big Ten. Man, that only leaves 2 for the SEC. And then there's going to be all sorts of comparisons. I shouldn't say it's only 2 for the SEC, but there's going to be all sorts of comparisons the committee's going to have to make between like an 11-1 SMU team and a 10-2 SEC team, etc. Okay. To drive it to your end of the spectrum, you get 1 bid out of the ACC, 1 bid out of the Big 12. That's 2. I guess you're having Notre Dame get knocked out.
Oh no, Notre Dame slipped my mind for a second, so I apologize for that. But yeah, that does change the the handicap on this quite a bit.
We'll put them on the side for a second. So we got the ACC, we got the Big 12, we got the group of 5, and what's the worst that the Big 10 could do?
The big. I mean, well. Honestly, if you just put Oregon in right away, I mean, if Indiana and Penn State both beat Ohio State, that would probably leave them with 3.
Yes. 3, 4, 5, 6. Right? 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's 6. And then 3 for the Big Ten, 1 each for the group of 5, the ACC and the Big 12. That's 6 total.
So that would only leave 1 additional spot if you had it in that direction. So that would actually leave the SEC as a 2-bid league. Is that right?
No, I've got them with 5.
5. Okay, 5. Okay.
I've got them with. This is ridiculous, but 6 if Notre Dame plays itself out.
Yeah. Yes. That's right.
But then, well, there's too many scenarios at this point to.
I was just putting out there. Like, I think it's just more likely than not, and I wonder if there's some way they can reckon this scheduling disparity that they have in these leagues, because I think it's a real problem when these leagues are this huge. I mean, like the strength of schedules are just going to be remarkably different. I mean, I'm sure you can find 2 teams in the SEC that you compare them and they have 1 common opponent the entire season. Like that.
I'm sorry, Sean, to cut you off. Think about this. When we entered this season, I actually posted a video that did rather well because it struck me at some point that Oklahoma had a ridiculously tougher schedule than Texas.
Yes.
They both come into the league. Their win-loss ratios from the previous season were the exact opposite. Like Oklahoma's was, what would, let's see, If you're playing 8 games against teams that play 8 games, what's that, 64 games, whatever that is, their opponents were like 40 and like 42 and 22 or something like that, and Texas's were 22 and 42. It was terrible.
Yep.
Actually, if in I don't know if this would play out as bad, but if you lined up all of Oklahoma's games in the preseason and listed them by probability of loss in the SEC, their second easiest game, now it's not the case now, but their second easiest game was Texas A&M. I'm sorry. Yeah, their second easiest game was Texas A&M, and it was easy to see Texas's second most difficult game is Texas A&M. It was terrible. Yeah, and this is what I kind of want to see happen, just to debunk the system, but I don't want to see it for this particular team, and it could be others. But think about SMU. If they go unscathed the rest of the way, they're going to get left out of the ACC championship game if Clemson and Miami run the table, because they're going to have, the way things are trending, the worst ACC record. They're going to have the worst, scheduling record, opponents win percentage. So they're going to get left out, and they'll be sitting there 11-1 with a loss to BYU by a field goal. And shoot, BYU could be, let's take it to the extreme, undefeated Big 12 champion.
Yep.
And what does SMU get left out of a playoff after getting denied a championship game appearance where they won every game, and throw up their hands and say, you gave us the schedule. All we did was go undefeated. Like,
you're saying the league, the ACC, would have an 11-1 after being shut out of the playoffs last year, right?
Well, I'm saying that BYU could get shut out of the playoff at 11-1 with an 8-0 record in the conference. So I have
SMU. We're talking about, right?
I'm sorry. Yes, SMU.
Yes.
Was I saying BYU this entire time?
You said it for that last point.
SMU. So I have a level of sympathy for any team under this scenario that we're seeing now with no divisions, that ties for a conference first place standing and gets left out of the conference championship game. But I exponentially have more sympathy for a team that's undefeated in the conference and ties for the conference lead and gets left out, because what else were they supposed to do? Nothing.
Can't do anything.
Yeah.
Can't be any better than perfect.
It's one thing if there's a 3-way tie and they're all 6-2, and you're like, okay, well, yeah, you got screwed, but you could have done something about it.
No, absolutely. I was going to say the SEC, there's talk about them going to 9 games, and this is something I haven't heard anyone talk about anywhere at all before. With this divisionless scenario, having these odd number of games in conference does create a degree of unfairness as well. Sure. I don't know if that's cooked into the tiebreaker system at all. It's a totally fine process. You're going to play an uneven number of home and road games if you have divisions, because you just have everyone in the division with the same schedule makeup.
Yep.
4 here, 5 there.
Yeah.
Or vice versa.
And you flip it the next season to the other division. Yep.
Right. But I mean, I don't know if this is cooked into the tiebreaker system anywhere, but it is wildly, I mean, it's pretty significantly unfair for half the teams to be playing one more road game than the rest of the league. Yeah, it's not, I mean, just in theory, that's another problem that it doesn't seem like they thought out all the way through. And I don't know if there's a great remedy. I don't think anyone ever wants to have 8-game conference schedules again, but I don't know if people are going to be excited to go to 10 conference games.
So these schedules,
10 conference games would alleviate, would be a solution to a lot of the things we're talking about. But
what is
a 10-game conference schedule would
Yeah.
would help would help balance the schedule out both in terms of the scheduling disparity and the home and road dynamic. But
so the plus here is that now that they've gotten rid of these divisions, is the obvious one is that the likes of the ACC Coastal and the Big Ten Western Division will not have to be dealt with anymore.
Mhm.
The other is that they're at least approaching these schedules with balance. They're trying to get everybody to play everyone within 2 seasons. So those are all good things. However, like we're going through with the expansion of these leagues, you miss so many teams that the likelihood of these log jams among teams that did not play each other just becomes more and more likely.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate your time. Are you going to be on tomorrow night?
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, maybe I'll talk to you more about the this rather paltry slate of games we have this weekend. I mean, other than the big one, obviously.
Yeah, it's the big one.
Yeah.
All right, John.
All right.
Thanks
Take care, Mark.
You too. Bye. Let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. We've got Rob on the line.
Hey, what's up, Mark?
Not too much. How you doing?
Hey, good. I just wanted to talk about that something the previous caller was talking about as far as Michigan's odds to beat Oregon. Well, for one thing, you weren't saying that Michigan was going to beat Oregon. You were saying like maybe a 20% chance at best, and I think he understood that a little bit towards the end of when you guys were talking about that, but. I think the likelihood that Michigan beats Oregon is incredibly low, but as we've seen with my Notre Dame losing to NIU and Alabama losing to Vanderbilt and all these other teams that have lost to unranked, all these other highly ranked teams losing to unranked teams or pretty poor teams this year, nothing is outside the realm of possibilities. And look, Michigan could beat Oregon if Oregon shows up and just thinks they're going to out muscle or out athlete Michigan. As human nature sometimes creeps in there, and if Dan Lanning can't get his guys up for the game, I mean they could lose. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Oregon is probably going to stop Michigan, but I think Michigan could, in a weird reality, they could win this game. And what Michigan needs to do for that to happen is they need to make this, a phone booth battle. They need to run the ball, control time of possession, and then obviously whoever they're playing at quarterback, maybe they can do a Philadelphia Eagles and have just like a tryout with the citizens around Ann Arbor. Hey, we need a quarterback. Somebody. I mean, I don't know who they're going to roll out there. I guess it's going to be it's not Orgy, right? But that's, to me, the biggest problem with Michigan beating Oregon is they just don't have a quarterback. They can run the ball. I think Mullings is a beast, but I just don't see a real good way for them to win. But like you said, there is a chance that they could.
Yeah, Dylan Gabriel's a highly effective quarterback, but he's not, from a talent standpoint, a great quarterback. If he throws 2 interceptions like he did against Michigan State, then things can happen.
Right. Well, and Gabriel, he's not really a push the ball down the field kind of quarterback, kind of what alluding to what you were saying there. He's kind of a more of a dink and dunk, very, very efficient. What is he like 76% for the year, something like that?
Yeah. Yep.
So I mean, he's very good at what he does, and I'm not ripping the guy, but yeah, he's not the kind of guy that's gonna go throw 20 long balls a game. That's just not the Oregon style right now. So. Like you said, if he tries to get fancy and throws a couple picks, I mean, anything could happen. But no, I do think personally Michigan's going to get stomped. But hey, we'll have to see what happens. One thing I had a question about: what's your opinion on Clemson?
Yeah, I had somebody challenge me in the comments after my top 25 was released that thought I was not giving Clemson enough respect, and they were trying to
Really?
Compare Clemson's resume to Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Said,
No.
whoa. The best team record-wise that Clemson has beaten is Virginia. They're 4-4. That is their best win. Texas has beaten Michigan, Vanderbilt. You would even have to say that Oklahoma, for as bad as they are this season, is better than Virginia. And obviously, Texas lost to the best team in the country. Arguably, they lost to Georgia by 15 points in a game that, sure, they were outclassed, but at least it was a football. It was 23-15 with like 5 minutes left in the game, whereas Clemson got annihilated by 31 points. So, anyway, that's an aside. Just you little PTSD when you bring things up at times that I think of the comments that I deal with of people
No, you're good.
are jumping off at tangents. But I don't know. Clemson hasn't played anyone. They really have played a horrible schedule. Now, the next 3 weeks, I'm not saying this is a gauntlet, but it's far tougher than what we've seen them play. They've got Louisville.
Yep.
A very strong offensive team. Bad defense. Excellent offense.
Right.
A lot of weapons. Tyler Shook's an underrated quarterback. Then they go to Virginia Tech, and that's probably going to be a night game at Lane Stadium against Virginia Tech, who's righted some wrongs. And basically, once they lost to Vandy, just have lost that crazy Miami game, 38-34, the Hail Mary play. Otherwise, Virginia Tech only has one loss in the ACC. They could play themselves into this mess if they upset Clemson and then some other things happen for them. And then they play Pitt on the road.
Yep.
So we're going to find out a lot more about Clemson. I think they're about the 15th best team in the country.
Yeah. See, that's kind of what I'm kind of somewhere there with you. I don't get this obsession with like several, YouTube personalities or college football personalities like, oh, Clemson's the best team in the ACC. And I'm like, why are we feeling this? Like, where are you pulling this information from? Because, like, sure, they played Georgia, props to them, but they got annihilated. And then, I mean, really, that's one reason the Louisville Clemson game is one of the most interesting games nobody's talking about. At least you're not seeing a lot of people talking about Louisville Clemson this week. But I'm actually looking forward to that game to see how Clemson plays a decent team in Louisville. Like, they're not a great team, but they're surprisingly. Like, they can sneak up on you. Like you said, they've got a really good offense, and Shook is definitely underrated. So,
yeah, so Louisville played the game, as you will know, against Notre Dame. And even though the score was a little bit closer than the game because they scored late to make it 31-24, they did cough up. Well, both teams, really, Notre Dame gave them some points too. So anyway,
both teams kind of gave away some points.
Yeah, they were clearly outplayed by Notre Dame. It was kind of similar to the way they beat Notre Dame the season before. In that, it was a game, but Notre Dame was clearly the better team. And then they lose the shootout against Miami, 52-45. And the other game was against SMU, and that was a game I watched start to finish, and that was a similarly very entertaining game with a lot of playmakers. They, I think that they've got a shot against Clemson, and I get the 10-point spread. Clemson's got a better defense. Cade Klubnik's having a much better season this year than he had last season. When he threw 9 picks, he's thrown 3. He's already thrown more touchdowns this year than he did last year. Clemson gives up a lot of points and yardage in garbage time, but it's garbage time. So they've had huge leads, and they've given up. Like 2 weeks ago, they played Virginia. They're up 42-10 in the fourth quarter. They give up 3 touchdowns that mean nothing. They win 48-31. They had a game like that against NC State. They eventually give up 35 points. But it's 42-7 at halftime. So completely meaningless points. So I tend to believe that their defense is still really good.
Right. Well, and that's the thing about that Georgia game. I think, what wasn't it like 6-0 at the half or something like that?
Yes.
So, I mean, the defense was playing pretty good against Georgia until they just weren't getting any. Like if you leave your defense out to dry for literally the entire game, they're going to get tired. They're going to wear down. And that's basically what happens. So, I think Clemson is kind of an enigma to me because I think they're better than what some people think they are, but I don't think they're quite as good as what other people think they are, which sounds like a stupid, obvious thing to say, but I've just seen a lot of Clemson love coming from various parts of college football lately, and I'm still kind of on the fence. I want to see how they perform against Louisville, Pitt, and especially South Carolina at the end of the year. That's going to be a fun one. So
I don't know that there's a team in college football that needs to be talked about that's in the race that has, we're into November now, that has not played anyone like Clemson.
Right.
It's not.
Yeah, I mean, Oregon's got the win over Ohio State. Georgia's got the win over Texas. Penn State, they beat USC, which was a gutty win, I guess, a gritty win. Same thing with the Wisconsin win. But to me, I think obviously we don't need to talk about it too much because Penn State's got to play Ohio State. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm not talking about great games. I'm talking about just a decent team, a team that's going to go 8-4.
Right. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. That's why I'm sad. Clemson's kind of my wild card team. I'm wanting to see how they're going to perform against some of these other teams coming up on their schedule because they finally start playing some people coming up. Going to that Miami Virginia Tech thing, man, that still gets me fired up. They should have lost that game. That was so silly, man. The refs this year have been atrocious. I mean, what more needs to be said about that, right?
So are you referring to the Hail Mary itself?
No, what I'm referring to the refs in that game because
are you referring to the Hail Mary?
Well, yeah, the Hail Mary and what happened with the calls on that play.
Well, I think they got it right.
They did, but they overturned it without obvious evidence. I mean, it's just like so from typically when a call is made, right? The rule is, and this kind of goes into that Texas thing about they got the right call in that Texas game, but the way that they went about getting it was wrong. So you're kind of on this thing where it's like, do we want to get the right call at whatever cost, or do we want to live with a bad call and just it's kind of a weird place, but I think it's definitely a topic worth discussing going forward. Although I think the precedent that was in that Texas game, you just can't. Now, I'm not 100% going to say that the crowd scared the refs into making that reverse call, but I mean, you can't really argue too much against it either. It's hard to argue against that. So,
yeah,
I just think refereeing in college football has been pretty atrocious across the board this year.
I just am okay with the call because in watching that 48 different ways in 13 different angles, I see no way that it can be determined that a Virginia Tech player caught the ball in bounds.
Right. No,
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. I don't know. It wasn't because the next week after that, didn't Miami get like another close call? Like,
yes.
I gotta remember. I gotta watch that game again.
There was a targeting taken off. Cal was about to run out the clock.
Yeah.
And there was a targeting against Miami that got taken off the board.
That's right.
I did not agree with. Now, in that case, I thought that Miami got the favorable call. Cal got ripped off. Cal's been the most unlucky team in the country. But anyway.
Yeah.
And so, Miami got the ball back and then drove like 90 yards to win the game.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. Oh, man. So you were talking about BYU earlier. Is there a game that they lose? I don't see it the rest of the schedule.
Well, hang on, Rob. Of course, what were we talking about a minute ago? Everybody can lose.
Well, everybody can lose, yes. But
there's all sorts of games that can be lost. Let's see here.
I don't see them losing to Utah. I could see them. Yeah, I don't know. I could see them slipping up against maybe one of those teams, possibly, but I don't know. BYU, they're definitely in the driver's seat for the playoff hopes, which I was not. You could not have penciled that in at the beginning of the year, and I would have been shocked.
Yeah, it is crazy that they've had this kind of season because, man, yeah, Utah was supposed to be the best, the
Yeah.
cream of the crop, and they're
I thought
awful.
Utah, yeah.
And wow, that is not daunting at all. That's falling right in line for them.
That's what I'm
But
saying. They could
rivalry
lose, but
game. That is arguably the most intense rivalry in college football that they're playing this week. So who knows? And they are on the road. But
yeah.
yeah, the rest of that just you. Arizona State though,
Yeah.
I can't remember what they did last. They only had 2 losses going into last weekend. Arizona State they're 5-2. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, Arizona State, their wins. I mean, they did beat Utah, but then again, who's not beating Utah recently? They don't look super impressive to me by any stretch. But hey, you're right. I think if that's the team to beat BYU, it's either them or Utah in that rivalry game.
Yeah.
But yeah, at the beginning of the year, I definitely thought Utah was the cream of the crop in that conference. But
well, I picked Kansas State to win the conference, so I still have some hope of being right.
Oh, you're still in the running.
They've got 1 loss.
Yeah. What do you think about one last thing? What do you think about this Texas A&M game coming up versus South Carolina? I know a lot of people are.
Yeah, I think it's a possible loss. There's a reason Vegas only has this as a 3-point game. Can you imagine Texas A&M? They're leading the SEC. South Carolina, and it's basically they're telling us it's a pick'em game on a neutral site.
Right.
And
yeah.
I have no issue with that. South Carolina's only played 1 lousy game this year, and that's against Ole Miss. Otherwise, they've been right there with Bama, LSU, beat Kentucky, which that means nothing now. But
right.
Yeah, this is going to be a test for Texas A&M. Again, am I going to be surprised if they lose this game? No.
Well, no. I think, I mean, South Carolina is a better team than what the record shows. Kind of what you were alluding to. Because their 3 losses came to pretty good teams, Alabama, LSU. But that I just think the running game for A&M, even though they're kind of in that, they're in like a little bit better of a version of a Michigan situation where they have a couple quarterbacks. Their quarterbacks, I mean, Connor Wegman's a 5-star. He's just not playing like it. And then I don't know what Marcel Reed is as far as rankings go, but he's a true freshman. He's either way, he needs experience. So, but Texas A&M's running game is good. Like Le'Veon Moss, that dude is a beast. And that offensive line, they just love to shove it down your throat. South Carolina's got a good defensive line too. So to me, that's where the battle's going to be won. If Texas A&M can impose their will on that good defensive line from South Carolina, I think the home stadium for South Carolina is kind of obviously it helps them out. But I still see Texas A&M winning this game by maybe 6 to 10 points, something in that range.
Actually, Marcel Reed got some really good experience last year as a freshman. He's a redshirt freshman.
Oh, he's a redshirt. Okay.
He played in the bowl game. He played
That's right.
well. And then Connor Wegman got hurt at the beginning of this year, and he was able to step in and play 3 or 4 games. So yeah, he's got and obviously gave him a spark. And I think that is just another example of Mike Elko knowing his players and having the pulse of the game and his team to make a quarterback switch at the right time.
Yeah, Elko is such a good coach. Like he is the perfect fit for A&M. I'm pretty happy for that college after getting stuck with Jimbo for as long as they had him. Oh man. But anyways, yeah, it's gonna be a fun week. Obviously, I'm sure the Ohio State Penn State game is going to be the one you're watching. Or that's the one you'll be paying the most attention to. But
That's the one.
yeah,
Yep.
it'll be a fun game. I wish it was at night though. Why can't it be at night?
Because they get better ratings at noon. Fox does. They've determined that.
Wow, that's surprising to me.
No, they made that decision in 2017. That when they got the full Big Ten, or at least they got the Big Ten contract, and they determined that they were going to put their best game at noon, and they've been doing that for 7 years now.
Yeah, it's just it's unfortunate for. I think night games, there's something about a night game with like a top 5 matchup that just it can't be matched, in my opinion. I love night games, but
You are in the majority there. I'm in the minority. I really don't care when the game's played. They could play it at midnight. It makes no difference to me, as long as I'm awake and coherent. So that wouldn't be like 9 in the morning. But as long as they're playing anytime past like 10:30 or 11 in the morning, it makes no difference to me when they're playing these games. But I am in the minority. You are in the majority because people are like, why isn't that a night game? That should be a night game. I don't. It makes no difference to me.
well, Mark, I'll say one more thing before I go. My gut, my brains tell me that Penn State should win because their defensive line and the problems that Ohio State's been having. But my gut tells me that Ohio State's going to win because A, they have to, and B, they're more talented from top to bottom, and they like eventually talent. I mean, talent doesn't always win. Again, look at Notre Dame versus NIU, but it wins most of the time. And since Ohio State absolutely has to win this game, I don't think that they're going to come unprepared. I think they're going to come fired up. I got Ohio State winning that game. Probably not by much, but I got them winning that game.
So, Rob, I tend to agree with you. The only thing I need to discern is how much of that gut is my fandom versus me just having a gut, thought or inclination that somebody's going to win. So, but I tend to believe everything that you just said, that Ohio State's a better team than Penn State, but Penn State is playing a more consistent, solid brand of football. Not anywhere else except for offensive line, which I deem to be the most important position when it's all put together.
Well, and that's one more thing. That's the other thing I look at is what is a team's ceiling versus what is their floor, right? Notre Dame, again, for example, their floor is horribly low, obviously. If they can lose to NIU, they've got a very low floor. But their ceiling, beating Texas A&M at Kyle Field and doing the things that we saw them do to Navy and some other teams this year, is obviously much higher. Ohio State barely lost to Oregon by 1 point at Oregon. So their ceiling, and that's not even their ceiling. That's I think that was them having, they've been having issues with that offensive line for a minute now, but I think that's not quite their ceiling. I think they can get higher than that, but that's the ceiling of what we've seen them do this year. I don't think their floor is that low. And I think from the past that we've seen Ohio State versus Penn State games, Penn State has to prove it to me that they can beat this team. And they, with James Franklin, they haven't beat Ohio State in, a long time.
Yeah, there's so much focus on how bad Ohio State looked against Nebraska, and I get that, but what has Penn State done that's been so awe-inspiring this year?
Right.
They had a 14-7 lead against Illinois with 4 minutes left in the game. They beat USC in a game that they were completely outplayed the entirety of the game. They pull it out, to their credit, 33-30 in overtime. They beat Wisconsin last week. They were down 14-13 fairly deep into the second half. They've not been playing dominant football.
Yeah, and USC and Wisconsin, all due respect, they're not Oregon. Those teams are middling, struggling teams in the Big Ten.
Yep.
So,
exactly.
Yeah. Anyways, Mark, it was good talking to you. I'll let you go. I'm pretty sure you got other callers. So,
thanks, Rob.
Yep.
2 more callers is what we have, by the way. We got our buddy David Greenshield stopping by.
Yes. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing just fine.
Excellent. I wanted to talk about the week that is in college football. I'm going to get into the game. You're going to do the call-in show, I would think, tomorrow, correct? Okay.
Correct.
I'm with you. By the way, week of Friday docket, by the way, as I take a look at it.
Oh yeah, it's awful.
Not giving us good college football on a Friday, Mark, by the
I
way.
am not waiting for those games to be over. We will just be here prime time, showing up whenever we want because we're not sitting around watching. I don't even remember who it is. It's a god awful.
Oh, it's awful. I mean,
Negative
well, unless you're looking at Boise State and San Diego State as like a classic at 8 o'clock.
Well,
you know,
if San Diego State was halfway good like they typically are, then that would be a decent Mountain West game, but it shouldn't be.
Yeah, USF and FAU ain't going to leave anybody really yearning for big time college football. I want to expand on a point that you had made to me the last time we had talked about how, like, this year, some of the big time matchups have left you a little bit, maybe disappointed.
Most of them. Yeah.
Most of them have. Although I kind of shot back and said that some of the under radar, although maybe I shouldn't say not so under radar games, have kind of been good this year. And there's been some other good games that you wouldn't necessarily think of, like, well, this isn't necessarily a big time matchup, but it's still a good game. You know what I mean? Miami's had a few of those, is where I was going to go with that.
Sure.
It brought me to think of something. Do we have the P word in college football this year, i.e. parity? I would say it's complete parity, but
I get where you're coming from, and
Yeah.
I think that most people would agree with you that this is a topsy-turvy season. I don't think it is to the extent that most people do.
Okay. You don't think you think we have more parity this year, though, than we've had in some of the playoff years, though? Some of those 14 playoff years when you bemoaned that there's only 3 teams that can win the national title or something,
Yes.
right, Mark?
I believe that, we've seen obviously seasons during the 14 playoff where once the national championship game was played, it was like, well, that's the team.
Yeah.
And there's even a drop off after number 1. Now, typically it was like, okay, we got 2 teams, or maybe we got 3 teams.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a drop off. I don't know that we had any seasons during the 10-year run where we even got to 4 teams. Like, we always saw 2 or 3 and then a drop off.
Right.
We could argue a few seasons, but
there's been a couple, maybe.
That was pretty much the deal. Where this season, I'll give you that.
Right.
That more teams can win the national championship, it appears. However, I'm going to make this statement right now, and since you are remembering statements I've made from the past, you're going to have to hold on to this one for a while.
All right, I'll have to dig this away. Yeah, there you go, Mark.
The semifinal games are going to be like just okay. Like the kind of games that we expected to see last summer.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this. Well, because the semifinal games the last 2 years, we've had 4 really good semifinal games. 22, you had 2 good semifinal games. Last year, you had 2 good semifinal games.
True. Yeah.
So you had competitive semifinal games the last 2 years. The championship games have been lacking. We all know that. But nevertheless, the semifinal games were close games. I will say this, though. Are you of the feeling that college football's about ready to ramp up? Because think about it. Month of November, we're getting better matchups. 12-team playoff on the horizon. Is there an optimistic Mark Rogers in there thinking that college football is about ready to ramp up and we're going to see some of our better games going forward?
Well, sure we will. Because, okay, let's say in the Big Ten, not even just looking at the very top of the conference, but the top third of the conference, what have we been given? We've been given Ohio State, Oregon, USC, Penn State. That's about it.
Do you want to throw in Team Up North and USC, or maybe
okay, and maybe Penn State and
USC. USC's had a couple good games.
Yeah. We're still awaiting Ohio State, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State,
right?
Indiana, Ohio State. I guess that's about it. Penn State has nobody else. Well, it reminds me of a comment that Tony Petitti, the Big Ten commissioner, made that that's their goal, which seemed kind of a curious, contradictory goal when he stated it. But I remember posting a video after he stated, we want to play our best teams against each other, the best matchups in November.
Mm-hmm.
And we also want to maximize playoff spots. And I thought, well, that's not congruent. That's a contradictory statement.
Mm-hmm.
If things are on the level, but it wasn't long after that because I pointed that out. Well, if you're playing your best teams, you're going to make sure that they have tougher schedules, and they're playing in November. That's going to make it more difficult to have more playoff teams. But it wasn't soon. So I said something's up, and then it wasn't soon after that they were, pounding the table for guaranteed playoff spots.
Okay, to the playoff spot question, and then I want to
Yeah.
get into a few of the games this week, kind of hash over a few of those. What is your opinion, whether it be Big Ten or SEC, that we get a 9-3 football team in this year?
I would normally have thought that it would be higher because we would normally have seen more cannibalization in the two lesser conferences, in the
Okay.
ACC and the Big 12. But we're sitting with all these, we're sitting with two undefeated teams in the ACC, but 4 conference undefeated teams, and then we've got these 2 undefeated teams in the Big 12. We haven't seen that.
Well, see, yeah, that's the point, though. What if the ACC gets multiple teams, and then the Big 12 got its shot at multiple teams?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I get your point. See, I find the ACC. All right, let's get into the docket this week. I want to get into that a little bit because this is all going to unravel as we go forward. Duke, Miami. How interested are you in that football game? And is that line, which I saw Miami -20, kind of out of control, Mark? I mean, your thoughts?
Well, Duke's pretty underappreciated. Look at their line last week. They were a 12-point underdog, and they should have won the game. They were lining up for a game-winning field goal on the last play of the game and missed it, and still only lost by 1 point in overtime. So they were undervalued last week, and they're undervalued this week. Miami was a double-digit favorite against Virginia Tech. They were a double-digit favorite against Cal.
Mm-hmm.
They survived those games. So, yeah, I think it's playing into our hands. Duke keeping that closer than 3 touchdowns. But our buddy Steve Merrill said otherwise.
He's like in Miami, really?
Yes.
To cover that. Wow.
Yeah.
See, by the way, does Miami remind you a little bit of LSU 23?
Sure. Yes. Oh, yeah.
I mean, the big time
Yeah.
quarterback, they score a lot, they give up a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I was kind of thinking. I keep on thinking Miami is LSU 2023.
Yeah. They just don't have to play the SEC.
That's true. That's true. Otherwise, they'd have 2, maybe 3 losses like LSU had last year. Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say this, though. I mean, looking at Miami's defense, I think 47th in points allowed. I think they're 47th, 48th in pass defense. So I think I'm tempted to say Duke keeps that within 20. That
Okay.
Miami scores 40 something, but
I'm
Duke
with you.
Yeah. Scores 30 something, and there you go.
Yeah, this is where are we going to go with this? 41-28
Yeah.
kind of thing. And David, now that you've thrown it out there, that comparison with the Jaden Daniels LSU team,
Yeah.
I will ask you if I can use your comparison on one of our 47 Miami shows.
Yes, you still have 47, or if you've cut back, I think a little bit.
Yeah, we've
more.
cut back a little bit, but well, you can allow me to bring that up.
Go ahead.
I think that's a really good analogy.
Right. No, I think Miami just seems to also be waiting to get had. You know what I mean? Is obviously officiating's kind of helped Miami out in a few football games. Dare I say? I think some of those referees have condos on South Beach or something. I don't know, but they've been in some close football games.
The thing is that it's, well, probably not going to hurt them though if they're had once.
I tell you what, they get through this one. My buddy Honda at the end of the year. Well, my buddy Honda now, I'm saying, might get them that last week. Honda will put up numbers against that Miami defense. Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Honda Ward, the McCord Ward duel is going to be something to watch.
Yeah.
I want to get into a few of the other tilts this week. I will say this. To the team up north versus Oregon. By the way, Will Johnson going to play or is he going to be out?
Well, I watched Sharon Moore's news conference this week, and of course, he was non-committal. He did say that Will Johnson, he guaranteed that Will Johnson will not sit out the rest of the season, that he will be playing for Michigan this year.
Okay.
But he was non-committal. I would only be guessing, but I'm going to guess that he's going to play.
See, I think if he doesn't play, first of all, I've said that, that secondary isn't anywhere close to where it was last year. Obviously, Moore being gone, Sammer still being gone. They lost Page. It's not the same deeper, talented secondary that it was. Now you take Will Johnson out of the equation. And I've stated, I think Oregon's got, if you ranked wide receiver groups in the country, wouldn't Oregon be like right after Ohio State or
absolutely
top 2 or 3 probably in the country as far as wide receivers? You look at Stewart, you look at Johnson, you look at those guys. If he's not playing, I think Gabriel does some real business against that secondary.
You're probably right, because other quarterbacks, Ewers and that gang would be the only comparable thing that they've seen this year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think who really, Miller Moss, when he had time to throw, carved him up at times, but he also took a beating. But Oregon's offensive line, much better than USC's.
Right. Yeah. What's the line? I caught it at like 14.5. Mark, I don't know if that's come. Yeah.
Yep.
That hook could be helpful though for the gambling public.
It could be.
That hook could be helpful. Maybe they keep it to 14 points. But I don't know. Merrill have an inside feel on that one?
Let's see. He thought that was awfully close. I'm trying to think what the over-under was.
Was that in the mid-40s or upper 40s?
Oh, I know what he liked.
Go ahead.
He brought up the dreaded parlay. He never brings up a parlay, and he thinks that Michigan and the under is a parlay opportunity.
Wow, that's interesting. Oh yeah, you could roll that together, get that line to a certain point. Yeah, I could see that. That's feasible. Plus, Steve's record's been solid. My college football the last couple of weeks, my NFL the last couple of weeks has been lacking. So
yeah, mine as well.
Yeah, I was going to say I don't want to go with any Rodgers picks anytime soon. So
you don't.
I want to ask you about Ole Miss. I picked Ole Miss to make the playoff at the beginning of the year. How much is that Kentucky loss just going to be a thorn in their side, by the way, especially with Georgia coming up next week?
Yeah, whether it's Kentucky or LSU, they blew both of those games.
Well, yeah, but you know what, though? I could have still seen a path with a loss to LSU, a loss to Georgia, and a 10-2 football team getting in, though, with their schedule.
You don't think if they beat LSU, lose to Kentucky and Georgia, you're weighing one has a better win, but one has a worse loss.
Well, right, Mark, but I'm just saying LSU's. I'm losing to LSU, losing versus Kentucky. I mean, it's more plausible you're going to lose to LSU than Kentucky. I mean,
I understand that,
right?
But it also gives you a better win.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't think it really matters. Is my point. Either one.
But I mean, bottom line, that team had to get to 10-2 to get in, right? You think?
Sure.
Yeah, I thought so too with that schedule.
Yep.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No.
No, I liked him at the beginning of the year. I thought that schedule was totally plausible for 10-2. I thought there was an outside shot at 11-1 even.
Yeah, I picked him 9-3, so they're
Oh,
about
really?
right where I had him.
Really? So you saw maybe a loss to Kentucky or somewhere else coming into play there?
Yes.
Wow.
And it kind of was Kentucky. I can't think of what other game it would have been. I think it was Kentucky, but I thought Kentucky was going to be better than they are.
Right. I mean, I guess I was looking at the Lane Train 12-team playoff schedule, the way it's set up, that this would be a nice year for him to possibly, get into the playoffs at his quarterback, And Jackson Dart's played pretty well, too.
Yeah, he's a good player.
All right. Well, I hope I'm not losing you here, Mark. I know you work those long nights.
I'm
Yep.
with you.
All right. Hey, by the way, who would have thought SMU Pitt top 20 matchup at the beginning of the year, by the way?
Yeah, I love it.
Early thoughts on that one? I mean, I like Holstein's coming back to play quarterback this week. It looks like
Yep.
he's going to be healthy. By the way, my two paisanos, coach of the year candidates, Narduzzi, Signetti, coach of the year. Are they the top two candidates for coach of the year?
Well, Signetti's definitely one of the two. Narduzzi, sure. He had a really good team 2 years ago, so he's bouncing back from one bad year. I would think that there's a better candidate out there, maybe somewhere, whether that's BYU with Kalani Sitake or that's
That's true.
SMU with Rhett Lashley. But he's up there.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a Narduzzi fan. Strong Ohio dude. I think he's done a solid job there. You know what? What's your gut feeling on this one, though? I mean, I think with Holstein coming back at quarterback, I'm a heavy lean towards Pitt.
Well, SMU's a sizable favorite in this game.
I just like Pitt. I think that I like the way I know they've won some close games this year. I know the Cal game was close. I know they've had some close games, West Virginia earlier in the year, but I think that they're playing better football over the course of the last few weeks.
Yeah, see, you're leaning my direction with the run game, the defense, the team that slugs out these close games and plays physical football. I'm leaning more toward the SMU, Rhett Lashley, spread them out, high flying quarterback, weapons.
Mark Rogers getting away from his love of the 20-17, 17-14 old school Big Ten football there.
Could be.
Wow, okay.
I've yet to pick any of these games, so.
Okay. Yeah, I'm interested to see if SMU does pull that off. Then when we get, no. Pitt gets Clemson late in the year too. By the way, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that really sets up big. That Holstein Klubnik quarterback duel could be big.
I like the ACC the way it's rounding out. I want to see some chaos.
No, I think it's going to be interesting. I actually think there's not a chance you get three teams in, is there, Mark?
Sure there is.
Really? We live in a world where we could see three ACC teams make the college football playoff.
Well, the way things are shaping up, this committee is going to have to be comparing 2-loss SEC and Big Ten teams against 1-loss ACC and Big 12 teams.
Yeah, because Miami gets to the ACC title game undefeated, and Pitt goes 11-1 but loses to Clemson, and then Clemson beats an undefeated Miami in the title game.
Yeah. Wait a minute. You've got Pitt losing to Clemson.
Right, but they would be 11 and they could be. I'm saying if they beat SMU, they would be an 11-1 football team. That would be their only loss.
Yeah, you're going to go that route.
Yeah,
I would rather see a 3-way tie for first place and SMU beat Pitt.
Okay.
It comes out the same, but
okay.
in terms of the committee, but I want to see the issue with an undefeated team not making a conference championship game and how utterly ridiculous that is.
Okay.
And that's
Yeah,
the
but
byproduct of these ridiculously sized conferences.
11-1 Pitt, 12-1 Miami, and then what? 12-1 Clemson.
Yeah.
I mean, that becomes interesting as far as the 12-team playoff there, don't you
Sure.
think, Mark?
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's going to be fun. All right, my friend. Well, we're going to get back together tomorrow. What time are you going to do call in tomorrow?
Oh, we are still hashing that out. We'll figure it out.
Okay. All right, my friend. Well, we wish we had a better docket tomorrow, but let's get back together and talk some college football.
Sounds good, David.
All
Thank
right,
you.
take care, Mark.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And we have our only super chat of the night, which reminds me, man, I should have kicked in. You know what? Somebody had a great suggestion the other day. They said, you got to kick in for $100 for these second hours, like everybody else on this network is. So that's going to be the rule of the day. We'll start that tomorrow. Yes, let's do that. But Adam, thank you so much for the contribution here. How about this? Adam suggesting here, Mark, you should do a special presidential election episode on Tuesday night. Wouldn't that be something? I'm sure you people would just love that. Wouldn't that be something? We'd probably be throwing haymakers by the end of the night in the chat. I don't know that we want to go that direction, but I think my political views are pretty well spoken in other venues. But there's Adam. Adam, how you doing tonight?
Hey, Mark, how are you?
I'm doing just fine. So
Good.
would we be on
Good.
election night talking college football or on election night talking about the election?
You know, I think a presidential election special at the Voice of College Football would be very special and attract people of all different teams. We could look at the different states in the Electoral College and have, like, the Wolverines helmet for Michigan, the Badgers helmet for Wisconsin. What a show that would be, especially if you were hosting it.
Yeah, I think we can do better. And more than that, I think the viewing public can do better here at the Voice of College Football. So we will set them free for the night to agonize or cheer or whatever is going to be the outcome for them.
Fair enough. That's probably the better course of action. So I won't be more than 5 minutes. I just was looking at some games this weekend and wanted to get your thoughts. I think this weekend is going to be an upset weekend, and I am predicting that Saturday will spark the end of Signetti in Indiana as Michigan State defeats Indiana 27-24. And I base that on the fact that Michigan State only lost 24-17 to Michigan, beat Iowa by 12 on October 19th, and is in East Lansing. What are your thoughts?
I think that that's a game that people should be looking out for. Exactly. There is most likely, as there typically is for most college football teams, let alone a team that's flawed like Indiana, a letdown spot. And this could be it. So they have yet to play a decent team on the road. And so Michigan State certainly is battle tested. They've seen better talent on a field when they played Ohio State and played Oregon and even Michigan, even if you consider Michigan not to be, of course, the team they were last year or as good as Indiana is this year. So, yeah, I think that that's a reasonable pick. We don't know about the starting quarterback, Curtis Rourke. I've not seen anything on him, but of course they had to go with the backup Taven Jackson last week.
I agree with you. And, when I saw South Carolina defeat Oklahoma 35-9, I believe it was on October 19th, I circled the A&M game, and I think Elko and the Aggies go down 30-27 to the Gamecocks on Saturday. What do you think about that?
Well, that's another one we've talked about a number of times here throughout the week about we released a week 10 preview. Folks, check that out because we've talked about everything that we're talking about here tonight with all these various matchups and possibilities of upsets. And South Carolina there's a reason that Vegas only has a 3-point spread on this game at South Carolina, which means it's basically Texas A&M a favorite on the road, and coming off an emotional win against LSU.
Yeah, I agree. And my last upset this week, two more, but I think the Ducks are not going to quack in Ann Arbor. I think Michigan's going to beat them 26-24.
Wow. Everybody hear that one.
Yeah. I think the Wolverines' defense is going to stifle Dylan Gabriel, and I think Davis Warren is going to have his coming out party. After throwing to the wrong team far too many times, I think he will get his act together, and Michigan comes out with the win. Is that too far out there?
It's out there, but I certainly think that they've got a better than puncher's chance. I think when you've got assembled a lot of players that have won national championships and they see the number one team coming to town, that there's a sense of pride that wells up. And Oregon has been playing exceptionally well, better than anybody in the country over the last 6 weeks, most consistent elite team in the last 6 weeks. So this could be the spot for an off game.
Agreed. And for those in Happy Valley, I'm sad to say that Happy Valley will become Unhappy Valley on Saturday because Ohio State is going to romp over Penn State. And I'm going to give a generous 30-17 victory to Ohio State, but it could be worse. I don't think Penn State's offense can score enough to challenge Ohio State. I think Ole Miss will take care of business at Arkansas 27-20. I think Georgia is going to beat Florida 38-23. I think SMU is going to beat Pitt 34-27. And the last question I had for you is, given that every week we have some really great games that maybe 20 years ago you would have only seen in the postseason, has it in any way dampened your passion for college football or kind of like desensitized you to the great games, if you know what I'm trying to say?
What that question reminds me of is working at ESPN for 19 years. And we used to have a position called the the associate director position. I'm looking at my phone at the same time, seeing stuff pop up. The associate director position was an AD position. And basically they were responsible for being in contact between the home base and the remote truck and coordinating breaks and graphics and all sorts of stuff. And it used to be funny to watch these ADs who were big sports fans. Of course, you get a job at ESPN, you're a sports fan, completely diss their allegiances because all they cared about was they did not want the game to go long, because if the game went heavy into the next game, it was a nightmare in terms of accommodating breaks and coordinating two trucks at the same time. And if we went into Sports Center, I was in that position zillions of times, sitting there transitioning to Sports Center, and they're 17 minutes late and they only have a 43-minute show and trying to cut down breaks and accommodate. So it was just a mess. It was always a mess. And as you know, 19 out of every 20 games goes long. So it was a mess all the time. And so these ADs would, which I was one at one point, would kind of diss. It became, who cares who wins? Just get the game off the air. And yeah, to a certain extent, doing what I do and have done in the past in other venues, it kind of numbs me to the outcomes of these games and being too emotionally tied to it. I don't want to say that I'm not emotionally tied to it, because I still am, but nowhere close to where I was when I was 25 years old.
Yeah, same here. I remember how I felt after the USC-Texas game in 2006, and
I can imagine.
I'm glad that I'm not in a state to be as traumatized as I was then. Last thing I'll say. Oh, by the way, I bought your book. I'm sure it's going to be outstanding.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
But I think ultimately, what the college football playoff committee should do at this point, I think they need to have an emergency press conference and cancel the season. And I think that they need to officially declare Georgia the national champion, because no one is stopping the Bulldogs with that defense becoming healthy. So enjoy the rest of the season, but the outcome, in my opinion, is pretty certain. It's going to be Georgia this year.
Are you staying with that because you selected somebody else at another point this season?
See, everybody is imperfect and has flaws, and that includes me.
Okay.
And that would include my Notre Dame prediction. I own that. I think Notre Dame will still make the playoff, but I think at this point, if Georgia is healthy on defense, there's no reason to play any more games, metaphorically speaking.
Gotcha. Okay.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate it.
All right. Have a good night.
Absolutely. You can catch Adam, everyone, Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern time on the Rutgers channel. Adam's also going live after the Rutgers games with the post game on the Rutgers channel. So please check out Adam's work right there. And we will do a better job of alerting all of you. So we're committed to giving preference to some of our new channels and new shows. Rutgers, Ole Miss, Indiana, Missouri are some of those that you need to be aware of. My book is on Amazon. It's basically Disputed National Champions of the 1990s. I'm not going to give you the long spiel on that. I'm just going to let you know that it's, I believe, a must read for college football junkies. We will talk about it a little bit more in depth at other times. And it's been mentioned in the chat a few times that I will be on Uncle Lou's show Saturday morning. So check us out on Uncle Lou's show. He does a college football morning show, I believe. Well, I know that now. Yes, Saturday mornings with Uncle Lou. So I'll be showing up over there. That'll be a good time. And we will talk some college football with Uncle Lou. Always look forward to that. All right, folks, appreciate you being here. The Voice of College Football. Be looking out for the notifications on Friday night as we will take your calls right here